When the American destroyers were introduced to the game, they came with two commanders, Bull Halsey and Arleigh Burke. About a year later, I believe, around the time the destroyer Benham was introduced to the game, they got a third destroyer commander, Albert Gleaves. And the difference between Gleaves and the other two commanders is he has access to this skill, Fragile Threat. You look at Japan, Reizo Tanaka has access to Fragile Threat. You look at the UK, Reginald Tyrwhitt has access to Fragile Threat. You look at Germany, Maximilian von Spee, access to Fragile Threat. You look at France, Philippe Bueno has access to Fragile Threat. But there's one full line nation that doesn't have access to Fragile Threat. Vladimir Trubetskoy has Look at Me Now in Mortar. Anton Gurin, the first Russian destroyer commander, has Look at Me Now in Flank Speed. So the question is, why does every other full line ship nation have access to Fragile Threat, but Russia doesn't? And that's the question I'm going to ask of Wargaming in this video. I believe that Russia needs a third destroyer commander with his skill as Fragile Threat. Now, the similarity between Russia and America in the beginning of the game, when the game was first introduced, they both have short range torpedoes. They're both gunboats, albeit with vastly different styles of play. They both didn't have great concealment. And we're looking here at the Russian tree. We're looking at the range of the torpedoes. Dursky 4.4, Strozovoy 4, which is pretty much the base for all the Russian destroyers. Yitzhaslav 5. But then we have ships like the Gremyashi, 8-kilometer torpedoes. All right. And that's similar to the American line, where you do have ships with longer range torpedoes. Here's another 4 kilometers. The one before that was 4.5, the murder sausage. Here's the Leningrad. The Leningrad has 8-kilometer torpedoes. All right, we know the Minsk has 4-kilometer torpedoes. Here's the Tashkent. The Tashkent has 8-kilometer torpedoes. All right, and the Kaba has 6-kilometer torpedoes. And I don't have the Ognavoy. I would love to have had the Ognavoy. I just didn't want to ruin my life during the Rust and Rumble event to grind it out and get it. If they put it for GXP, if they put it for doubloons, I like Russian destroyers. I like destroyers in general. I would probably buy the Ognavoy. All right, so in my opinion, Wargaming needs to rectify this. For some reason, probably because a lot of the people that play this game are from America. I'm American. I personally didn't complain to anybody about the destroyer commanders not having fragile threat. I thought that was baked into the cake that American destroyers didn't get that. They had big concealment or poor concealment because they were gunboats to force you to play them as a gunboat. But then we saw with the introduction of the later ships like the Benham, which isn't really a great example for what I'm talking about here, that just has a ton of torpedo launchers. But ships like the Benson, the Fletcher, I believe the Sims, some of these destroyers have access to a torpedo mod that makes it go 9.2 kilometers base level, up to 9.6, 9.7, 9.8 perhaps, if you have Gleaves on there. And then, of course, the gearing. My gearing build has 17.6 kilometer torpedoes, but I think it's been well documented that you can get that around 20 kilometers for a torpedo build. If you're using Gleaves fully maxed out, everything to increase the range at the deficit of everything else. But the fact remains is that Albert Gleaves has fragile threat in his skill tree. And there is no Russian destroyer commander that has access to Fragile Threat. Now, in my opinion, the easy way for Wargaming to have fixed this way back when is not to introduce Albert Leaves, but to do an update where they added it in to Arleigh Burke's second row skills. And that's probably what you could say would be the easy way for Wargaming to address it with the Russian commanders. Gurin and the Gremiashi, the ship we're seeing here on the screen, which is why I chose it. Those were the first Russian destroyer and destroyer commanders introduced to the game. They came with each other. If you bought the Gremiashi, you got Gurin. So the easy thing to do would be to add Fragile Threat into Gurin's skill tree. However, I do not think at this point they should do that because they've set a precedent. If you complain enough, you get a new commander with the skill that your skill tree or your nation is lacking. And so, for that reason, I think Russian players or people who play Russian destroyers should get a new Russian commander with a new skill tree for Russia. I'm not saying a new skill tree out of whole cloth. In fact, I think duplicating Albert Gleave's skill tree, with the exception of the base trait, would probably be a good idea or a good solution to this. And after this gameplay, we're going to address who I believe this commander should be. See, Wargaming, here's the best part. If you listen to your player base will create the solutions for you. You know, it's funny, it makes me think back to when I played World of Tanks, a game that, in my opinion, was ruined by Wargaming. Much in the same way, and that's the subject of another video, some people think this game is on its way to being ruined by wargaming at the expense of the almighty dollar. That's neither here nor there. Okay. But the point is that wargaming was like, hey, we're going to introduce mercenary tanks. And literally 1 or 2 days later, somebody had created an entire skill tree created of tanks from nations that didn't have enough tanks to make a full line. Similar to the Pan European or the Pan South American or whatever they're called on PC. And everybody was totally jacked. They're like, man, this is great work by this guy. He had every tank, every tier laid out, what it would have, what it wouldn't have. He did all the work for them. And instead, as we all know, mercenary tanks became, oh, the hull of this ship and the gun of this ship, and or the hull of this tank and the gun of this tank and the engine of this tank, or the concealment of that tank. And it was just not what anyone was expecting, and that's why I think, in my opinion, it was so poorly received. Please, Wargaming, for the love of God, do not do that to this game. All right. So we're looking here at the Gremiashi, a torpedo boat with a non-torpedo boat commander. As you can see, our concealment, 5.1 kilometers. Let's be honest, we all know what it's going to be with a 10% reduction with fragile threat. It's going to be 4.9. Okay, Russian ships, like American ships, don't have great concealment. So the lowest you're going to get is 4.9. But the players should have the option to decide. By the way, not that I'm bragging, that was a pretty cool double strike. All right. And I'm going to do the homework for you. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you the name of the guy you should introduce as a commander. I'm going to read his bio. I'm going to tell you exactly what his base trait should be. And I think everybody who watches the video will agree it's a good idea. It's not that overpowered. I'm not asking for anything other than you give Russian players, Russian destroyer players, the same opportunities as you've given to every other nation. Again, I want to say this for the record. When the game was introduced, I'm a beta player, okay, beta weekend player. Russia and America, gunboats, close range gunboat, long range gunboat, no access to fragile threat. But something changed where suddenly American destroyer players got access to Albert Cleaves and they got access to fragile threat. And so all I'm asking for here is equal and equitable treatment for us players who love playing Russian destroyers and feel that the Gremiashi, the Tashkent, the Leningrad, the Ogdevoy, even though I don't have it, maybe even the Kaba would benefit from a destroyer commander with access to fragile threat. Okay? Now, look, the Gremiashi is a good ship in its own right. It doesn't need help. Okay? But I think we can all agree that the American destroyer didn't particularly need help either. There wasn't some stat in the meta that made Wargaming say, oh, we need to give American destroyer commanders access to fragile threat. No, what happened was all the American people who played American destroyers regularly complained, and they got what they complained about. So I'm going to draw a parallel to something totally different, but the people who are familiar with the situation will know what I'm talking about. At one point, the government said, hey, green tip AR ammo is armor piercing. And everybody complained and they rescinded that. But then, like 6 months later, they did the same thing for AK-74 ammo. And because the complaints were so much less because it was not as popular here in America, they let the change stand. Okay, and that's my fear that not enough players play Russian destroyers because let's face it, Russian destroyers aren't really friendly to a new player. Um, the Gremiashi, long range torpedoes, premium ship, the Leningrad, long range torpedodos, premium ship, the Tashkent is the top of the line. You have to grind all the other ships to get there, and that includes the Minsk. And believe me, guys, here's my Minsk video. I know how tough grinding the Minsk can be. When I was doing it, it was the worst grind of any ship I've ever had in this game. Oh, until I learned how to play the Minsk, until I learned how to embrace the Minsk. And you know what? People who get, if this destroyer commander comes to be, no one is going to use that guy in the Minsk. There's 4 kilometer torpedoes. It's not the right commander. But, you look at other premium ships like the Orkan, the Bliskovica, those came with a commander. You know, you've got ships that have access to long range torpedoes, just like the American destroyers got access to long range torpedoes, and they have a concealment commander. So that's all we're asking is for a concealment commander for Russia to give players the option to do a concealment build. And here's the thing, it's like if you build it, they will come. If you give players the option of doing a concealment build for Russian destroyers, maybe more people will play Russian destroyers. Just something to think about. Maybe they'll buy the Gremiashi. Maybe they'll buy the Leningrad. Maybe if you put it in the store or put it in the steel shop, please don't put it in the steel shop. Maybe if you put the Ognivoy up for grabs, people would buy it and play it if you gave them the option of a concealment commander. Please put the Ognivoy up for sale because I would buy it. All right, so this game quickly coming to a close. Our team dominated the other team. We're just waiting for this ship to die. Just go ahead and die. Look at that. He's dodging torpedoes. He wants to stay alive. Everybody's shooting at him. Been there, done that, guy. I know the feeling. But look at who is going to get this kill. Yes, folks. Yes, your hero, the narrator of this video, with a torpedo strike. All right, so real quick, I'm going to divert to talk about the scoreboard. 50,000 damage, 4 kills in the Gremiashi. Really lackluster silver. Not even top of the board, not even, but those 4 kills stand up on their own. Good job to the Jaguar player whose name I am not going to try to pronounce. All right, so let's talk about who I think should be the destroyer commander, and that's this guy. His name is Valentin Drozd. I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name. He is Belarusian. He served in the Soviet Navy starting in 1920. When we look at his naval career, He served an assistant watch officer aboard the Oktoberskaya Revoluция, studied at the Navy Pilot School in Sevastopol. In 1930, he served as the navigator of the destroyer Volodarsky. And between October and May of 31, he studied at the torpedo class of the Specialized Forces for Commanders of the Naval Forces of the Red Army. He served as a torpedo officer above the destroyer Stalin and became the commander of the Volodarsky uh, sometime in the mid 30s. All right, then during the Spanish Civil War, he became an advisor to the Spanish Republican Navy destroyer flotilla. For his actions during that service, he received the Order of Lenin and the Order of the Red Banner. I'm pretty sure the Order of Lenin is a really good award to get if you're Russian. After that, he became the commander of the Baltic Fleet Destroyer Brigade, then the acting commander of the Northern Fleet, then the permanent commander of the Northern Fleet. Led that fleet during the Winter War, became a counter admiral, head of the Black Sea Higher Naval Institute, commander of the Baltic Light Forces Detachment. Blah blah blah. Did some other stuff like evacuations of Kronstadt and Leningrad, defense of Leningrad. He was killed in 1943 when his car fell between the ice between Kronstadt and Leningrad in the Gulf of Finland after it was shelled by German artillery, and one of the shells broke the ice and the car sank to the bottom. All right, so his final rank was a vice admiral, and I really think that he would be a great commander, and his base trait would be called stopwatch, and it would give 0.5% for every level. So at level 20, you would get a 10% reduction in your torpedo reload time. I don't think that is a particularly overpowered skill. For example, if you had a 60-second torpedo reload, due to his base trait, you would take 6 seconds off that reload. So that is my answer, my solution to the problem. The problem being is that Wargaming is hamstrung Russian DD commanders without Fragile Threat. We would like Fragile Threat and a new commander, Wargaming. Let's get it done. Thanks for watching, folks.